it's probably most likely, definitely not the right fit. How many of you are confident in picking out the right size when it comes to buying a new pair of boots? I can tell you personally, fitting is the number one most important thing for me when it comes to deciding whether or not I'm going to wear a shoe. That's what I'm going to talk about. I want to cover what it is that is important to me. I'll show a range of different boots that I have. Here is my newest boot from Cobbler Union. I'm just going to use this to kind of demonstrate a few of the most important measurements. What I find very important is the heel to ball measurement. So that way the proper length of the foot flexes at the right point of the shoe. The overall width of the shoe so that it's comfortable both in the toe box as well as the joints of your foot. And then the volume of the vamp and how that transitions to the volume of the toe box. Let's get into a bit of a comparison, and I'll show you some video with each of these pairs of boots that we're going to talk about on my foot so you can see how that fit actually translates. Before I get into these details, hang around till the end. I'm going to go over the top 3 myths about sizing when it comes to shoes and boots. You'll want to hear my thoughts on those. Back to this pair of Carmina. This is a very good fit for this particular boot. And that's an important distinction. Basically, what I'm saying is that you can have a good fit, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right fit. It could be the best possible fit for that style, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a comfortable or an enjoyable fit to wear for an extended period of time, even just throughout a single day. When looking at this pair of Carmina on my feet, you can see that the flex point is right at the ball of the foot on the boot, and there's not an excessive amount of excess leather that is wrinkling, folding, or rippling on the vamp as I walk. You can also tell in the lacing right here, when that is fully closed, it's got almost like a reverse V shape so that it's open at the bottom and then it's very tight at the top. The problem with this is because the shape of the actual lacing quarters of this boot, the top of my instep falls in the middle of one of the lacing quarters. Because of that, it does cause a little bit of extra kind of discomfort right on the top of my foot. Overall, this is definitely something I would say that this fit is kind of right at the bottom of the scale from a standpoint of it's acceptable. It doesn't cause me any pain throughout the day, but it's not necessarily something that I would say is an excellent fit. Now let's talk about this pair of Cobbler Union boots. The fit, I would say, is average to average plus, and I'll walk you through the reasons why, touching on similar fit points that I talked about with the Carmina. When we look at this on my foot, you can see, again, the flex point is perfectly lined up with the widest part of the boot. More importantly, there's less leather that's actually rippling or folding as I'm walking. What that means is there's not a lot of excess volume in the vamp or in the toe box. This has a very particular shape that you'll notice a lot more in workwear boots, but right here, it's got a very sloping silhouette to the actual vamp that transitions into kind of a pitched toe shape, as opposed to what we saw in the Carmina, where it was a thicker toe box and vamp that just kind of stayed horizontal. Another really important distinction to make with this boot is the arch support. The shape of the arch is something you can really tell just by looking at the overall shape of the boot. When you look at the Carmina, the shape of the arch support is rather non-existent, for lack of a better description. The Cobbler Union pair here, you can see a very distinct height in the arch. That's the actual shape of the last this upper was shaped on. And what that shape of the last is doing is it's shaping the upper to actually hold your instep in the proper position so that your feet do not become prone. Another important piece here is you can see the shape around the heel up to the ankle. It really does kind of mimic the shape of the anatomical silhouette of a foot, a heel up through the Achilles. And that just goes to further provide that overall support kind of from the vamp to the heel. It makes it for a very comfortable, supportive, and easy wearing, comfortable choice throughout the day. Now we're going to look at the pair of Enzo Bonafe Ballway boots in Shell Cordovan. I would say this is a close second to fit with the Cobbler Union, and I'll explain here in a few moments. First, I'm going to call out the toe shape, but you can see right here, this has a rather narrowing silhouette on the toe box, and what that's doing is it's going to cause a little bit of discomfort around the outside of your foot if you happen to have a normal to a normal wide forefoot of your foot. More gradual silhouette, much more gradual last shape going into the toe box, where you can see here with the Enzo Bonafe, basically as this is coming down, it's still sloping, and then right here where the toe begins to flatten out, it's a very short transition there. For me, with a higher instep, that is not as functionally comfortable as I'm wearing it throughout the day, especially combined with the narrower toe box on this last. It's just something that those two aspects of this last combine to be a little bit problematic. Now you'll notice this does have a nice little silhouette similar to the Cobbler Union. And as we come around here, it does have a very nice overall shape of the heel that does mimic the anatomical shape of your foot. The problem is this is a very shallow silhouette. And not only is it the silhouette that's shallow, but it's the actual last shape. The overall fit and how secure my foot feels when I'm wearing these boots, not the best. It's just not as comfortable as others are. Now, as promised, the top 3 myths, in my humble opinion, based on all my experience. Let's start with number 1 or number 3, however you want to look at it. The leather is going to stretch. Don't worry if it's snug and uncomfortable, it'll break in. Leather does stretch. Leather does mold to your foot. Your foot is going to sink into that insole, creating an additional few millimeters of volume in the overall shoe, giving you some additional room. Those extra millimeters really shouldn't be counted on to make the boot fit. Everything that my experience has told me, the boot is not going to change how it's fitting. The rule of thumb basically is if you try the shoe or the boot on and it's causing you pain, you need to just move on to another shoe. Now, what happens if you're in between sizes? You can either go with the one that's a little bit or overly snug, or you can go to the one that has too much room. This is one of those things that you really need to have faith and confidence in your own judgment. And here's why. If you go with the size up, I personally am confident in my ability to make my own custom insoles out of scrap leather. And what that allows me to do is err on the side of getting the shoe that is slightly larger, and I can craft a half, front insole or a full insole to perfect that fit based on the areas of my foot that I know need that extra support or that extra volume to be removed. If that's something you're not comfortable with, which I'm sure most are not, that's when you really need to decide, are you confident to risk getting one that's too small or one that's too big and may end up ultimately being unwearable? Is made to measure and bespoke expectations. When you are starting out, you're getting your first pair of bespoke shoes or your first made to measure, there are a few things that you should be able to manage your expectations around. This is the first time that Shoemaker is doing it for your foot. This may also be the first time you are helping to guide that shoemaker or any shoemaker along the process and giving feedback about what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Because of that, the fit may not be perfect. It's a journey and it's a relationship that you're building with that shoemaker. Each time you start this process over with a different shoemaker, there's always a risk you're going to have to begin that learning curve with that shoemaker from the beginning. And I can understand why you may have the highest of expectations, and you should. You should also be able to manage that alongside what's reasonable for a shoemaker to be able to provide for the very first pair that they are customizing the fit for your individual foot. I know fit of shoes and boots is definitely a hot topic, and it's one of the most difficult things for somebody that's just starting out. Let me know if you have any interesting fit journeys or experiences you'd like to share in the comments. Definitely appreciate the support. I'll see you next time.